This is Pamela Kuhn, and the curtain is up on Center Stage, the show about the arts and the artists behind their work. In musical terms, a divertimento is a light and entertaining composition, typically one in the form of a suite for chamber orchestra. Well, there is the well-known Mozart Divertimento in D major, which is an absolute delight, or Joaquin Rodrigo's 1982 cello concerto, which was written in the form of a divertimento. But today I would like to speak about the French film Divertimento, directed by Marie Castille-Masson-Char from 2022, a delightful film in the form of a suite. But it is more importantly a searching inner retrospective about a young Algerian girl in France who has the desire to become a conductor. And I must say here, the daring to become a conductor, as the field up until now has been littered with women who have tried to compete in the world of symphonic orchestras, which has been dominated by men. Many have walked away or settled for second best until now. I am happy to say that we live in the era of women stepping up to the podium and owning their right to lead the orchestra. But in the late 1990s, when this film was set, it was not so easy. Divertimento is a film about dedication, love of music, and tenacity, and all driven by the passion of its heroine, who wants to change the world with her art form. It is also one of the featured films this year in the 18th annual Focus on French Cinema Festival 2023, which will be opening April 20th at the Avon Theatre in Stamford. And I have with me the programming director, Joe Meyers, known to many of us as a literary and film author and devotee of French cinema. Welcome, Joe, back to Center Stage. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me back, Pamela. It's a pleasure.
And you know, I've watched you with such delight on all the programming you've been doing, your regular show, I think your other radio show podcast on film. You always have the most interesting subjects, I have to say.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, you keep going, and French Focus on French Cinema is so fortunate to have you. But I want my listeners to also know that besides writing about theater books and the movies, you once ran the first and only art house movie theater on the Delmarva Peninsula.
That was a real adventure. That was a real adventure.
And I know we've talked about that before, but how brave of you. I love that. You're an architect. And in 2012, the Mystery Writers of America gave you the Ellery Queen Award for your writing on crime fiction. Well, you get around, Joe. I have to say that. I
try to stay busy.
You know, in many ways, I'm calling you an architect of starting, this art house film theater. And for people like you and me, certainly I've been the architect of many of my own projects. We resemble the heroine in the film Divertimento, which you are showing. Because I have to say, she was so powerful, she was so strong, a young girl, so mature, but so bound in her drive to achieve loving her music in a world which maybe wasn't friendly to immigrants and wasn't friendly to women on the podium. So maybe I should let you take it away from here and introduce Divertimento to us.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite films. Marie Castille has had other films at our festival in years past. She's pre-COVID, she was a visitor, and we're so happy that she's coming over for some events this year. But she was approached to do this film. It's based on the real story of this young woman, Zoya Ziwani, I hope I'm not mispronouncing her name, who eventually founded this Divertimento orchestra, which still exists in France, and the thing that was fascinating to me about the film was, through a coincidence, I watched the screener of the film right around the same time as when I saw the movie Tar with Cate Blanchett. Mm-hmm. And I just thought there couldn't be a more dramatic difference between films about classical music, because Tar, despite its qualities and certainly a stunning performance by Cate Blanchett, was a dark vision of a woman as the conductor of a major orchestra, disturbing. Whereas this movie is really about the power of music to touch all kinds of people. There's a wonderful scene towards the end of the movie where there's this performance outdoors, and you just see a cross section of humanity being moved by the music because, as you know, music goes past our conscious, intelligent thinking right into our soul, our heart, whatever you want to call it. And you see that effect in the film several times, and the movie is a real love letter to the power of music to bring diverse people together, to inspire people. I just think it's a great film. I really do.
I agree with you totally. There's no doubt about that. For instance, I was so touched as a musician, especially when our heroine Zaya, when she goes out to the train station and she's listening to the train tracks and the rumble and the rhythm, and we understand that music and rhythm are tied together. And while she's listening and letting this seep into her, she's starting to hear the music that she's conducting. Now, this is a young girl who, she's fighting a lot of odds in France.
Yes.
And she does it very elegantly. She does it stoically with a lot of integrity, where many would have just fallen by the wayside immediately in a pool of tears. But the fact that she allows what her parents start as this tender love of music and listening to music all the time, and she's incorporating it and wanting to conduct from day one. I loved that she was living her art and was not afraid to pursue it.
Well, and you see how music touches her as a child in one of the opening sequences when her parents are watching a musical performance and they're playing the bolero, and you see our protagonist as a girl sucked right into it, and connecting with it. And the movie comes full circle in a way when we see her conduct it towards the end of the film, that this same piece that inspired her is going to inspire other people.
And of course, this beautiful, I think, Nigerian girl at the very end, young girl, she's imitating the conductors at the end. We know this is the baton is literally being passed on.
Absolutely.
It is so dear. I have to say, on a personal note, Joe, this Divertimento really spoke to me on another level. I grew up in the wilds of Eastern Oregon, and I had absolutely no culture around except for country western music and the outdoors.
Yeah.
And I saw myself in this young woman because I knew I had to fight, to get to a place in my music making. But there were so many salient points of this tenderness, as you say, in the love letter, that I almost lost it about 3 times in the film. Watching it, I was so overcome with that true reality of emotion. And this is based on a true story.
Yes.
One of those was her twin sisters. She is one of a twin, and her twin sister plays the cello very well, and is driven by her cello teacher to be the best. And at one point, she fails a competition where she's supposed to win a gold medal, but her teacher stands up and says, no, she has more to go for. And in the next scene, he brings her this handmade cello by his son, who's a luthier. And I was so overcome. Here are these immigrants just trying to have a stronghold, and we feel that they're going to be, slapped down at every turn. But there is such a grace of humanity in every scene, but not being real.
And the way it shows the power and the value of parents who really believe in the arts for their children. You know what I mean? No matter what your background is. I must say, I thought of my own parents who, we were middle-class people. They were not college educated, but they loved theater. They loved music. I was fortunate to grow up in Philadelphia, so I was taken to see the Philadelphia Orchestra many times as a child. So, one of the things in the film that made me sad was I know that in this country, a lot of music education has been cut in public school, and Philadelphia still had that. And this is going to sound a little hokey, but I can remember the day my music appreciation teacher put on The Rite of Spring, for instance, after setting it up as a revolutionary piece of music, and I just think it's terrible that the kids now in public schools don't have those kinds of moments where you're really connecting with classic music, the movie is a real call for music education, for supporting people in music. And I interviewed Marie Castille on Zoom. We're going to have that on our website when the festival starts. And she said that in France, there's still a strong belief in music education in the schools, so that she doesn't think it's a similar situation to here. And, she's sad about that because, music is something that people of any background, any economic stature can enjoy their whole life. Whereas, for instance, like physical education was okay, and I was happy to take it, but I never climbed a rope again after I graduated from high school, But I've listened to music with great pleasure. And like I said, I remember that moment. And I remember the teacher one day allowed us to bring in music that was important to us. She was very open-minded. And one girl, an African-American girl, brought in Heat Wave, the Martha Reeves and the Vandellas record.
I love it.
And again, that was not music I was familiar with, but that immediately spoke to me. You know what I mean? So this movie dredges up a lot of thinking about music, the role of music in your life, how important it is to people of various backgrounds. It's an amazing movie.
It really is. And all those beautiful smaller moments of sharing within the film as she brings players together from all different diversities, of course, from Paris to the suburbs, as she builds this orchestra. Now, we know this is a true story. She is still going. She built Divertimento as a standing separate orchestra. It is hers. She's a dynamo conductor.
Yeah.
She did work with the great conductor who is featured in this film, which was, the scenes of that were truly incredible, as he could see and feel her real talent immediately. But he knew that there was going to be a problem for her as a woman. And again, Joe, in the late 90s, I've watched so many women conductresses. It really, they've tried to be honored. Yeah, they've tried to take that, and they weren't taken seriously enough. Orchestras can be quite difficult, with women conductors. They don't feel they're masculine enough or they're powerful enough. And of course, now the tables have changed. And I think that one of the things about Tar that you mentioned, the film with Cate Blanchett, I thought, well, we're going to see a real reveal here about the plight of a woman conductor. But actually, it was really about atrocities of any conductor. And you talked about the dark side of that. And Divertimento definitely is the flip side to that. I think Tar is a fantastic film on its own. I think it failed on many levels. I think it went way too far with the elegantly cruel, I think the New York Times called it. And it was cruelly elegant. And I think that worked against it because it was just too much on every level.
And it tried to pack too much in. It had so many issues going on. And the whole thing of her being a harasser, like in the vein of male powerful harassers, I thought wasn't developed well enough. It sort of comes in from left field and then takes over the movie. And I just thought the director didn't quite digest all of the aspects. And indeed, there were reports that his original thought was having a male protagonist, and then at some point switched it to a female protagonist. And there was a very interesting piece that interviewed Marin Alsop, and she was kind of annoyed by the film because, frankly, she felt that how many other married lesbian conductors are there in the world, and that she sort of felt that maybe Tar was borrowing from her, but not in the best possible way.
She definitely felt she was being targeted.
So Divertimento, and the thing about Divertimento, it's not at all a saccharine movie. It shows you how difficult it is. And the conductor who becomes her mentor, I think one of the things the movie shows very powerfully is how mentors have to be tough.
Yes. Yeah.
he does soft pedal. I mean, he really pushes her hard, and it benefits her. And I think a lot of times now, with talk of safe spaces and microaggressions and all of this kind of stuff, we forget that sometimes you have to be made tough to face the world.
Exactly.
And he helps her do that, So that's just one aspect. This movie has so many angles to it. And the other thing that the director told me that I didn't think about was one of her top priorities was that every character in the movie, other than the two leads, be played by actual musicians. So all of those like cranky kids that don't want to pay attention to her, everybody who's in those orchestral groups is a real musician. So her casting process was long and challenging because she had to find musicians who she also thought photographed well,
Yeah.
could pull off scenes. And so, I mean, this woman director bit off a big challenge, and I think she succeeded royally. And
I think
it's interesting. I brought up Tar, and she said one of the problems or challenges that the movie, they opened the same day in France as Tar.
Oh, God.
So
Okay.
she felt that was not the most ideal thing, but I guess they had to get it open by the end of the year, or there were only so many opening weekend slots or whatever. So she has not seen Tar. She said she decided not to see it so she could focus on promoting this film.
Isn't that interesting?
And then see it later, when she's ready for it.
In a way, I wish I had not seen Tar, Joe, because I have to say I would push it right into the horror movie category.
It does have elements of horror. I mean, when she falls down in that basement, it's like something out of a slasher movie or whatever.
It is.
So
It's
a weird mixture. And I mean, that director was so lucky to get Cate Blanchett because she holds the thing together if it can be held together, and she also gives everything in terms of her performance.
Yes,
I would not fault her in the least.
No, we can't do that because she is great. But I have to say, Divertimento wins on every level. And I want to point something out. At one point when our heroine Zaya is trying to talk the mayor of her suburb into developing this orchestra and standing behind it, she does it with the panache of a 40-year-old who has seen the
yes.
But the one thing she has in mind is that she wants to change the world with music. And he actually challenges her with that. He said, you want to change the world with music? And she said, yes, because she understands how she has been changed, how she has grown through that in her young years.
Yes.
And it's real. I don't want to give everything away, of course, but that ending scene is probably one of the most powerful I've seen in a long time because of its healing power of our heroine. And so everyone, I really challenge you to go out to the Focus on French Cinema to see this film. And Joe, I understand that you're going to have several screenings of this.
Yeah, it's sort of recent news. Originally, because of our concerns about getting an audience back to the theater for every movie, we're playing it very carefully. Last year, we had one public screening at the Avon opening night. This year, we had planned to have an opening night and what we call a centerpiece, so we were going to expand to two. But Renee Ketchum, our great leader, pushed the Avon to provide us with a special matinee performance of Divertimento in the theater on Wednesday, April 26th at 1:30. And because one of the things that the director said was that she was concerned about watching it at home was she put so much attention into the mixing of the music and making the music important that she actually says in the interview she would hope that people who watch it at home would have earphones or earbuds or whatever to have the music really emphasized. So we're thrilled that we're going to be able to show it on a big screen, with stereophonic sound, and that she will be there for a Q&A with whoever comes. So
That is fantastic.
That was one of the best pieces of news we've had in the past month because I mean I was thrilled to have the movie in any way, shape, or form. And she's also doing, I believe, 3 educational events connected with the movie. You know, talking to students about it in New York City and in Greenwich, which is fabulous. But I was so thrilled that our regular audience, if that's the right word, our adult audience, can come out and see the movie on a big screen. So we're now up to 3 public screenings, you know, which is 3 times what we had last year. So we're slowly inching back to theatrical screening at a time when, you know, the movie business is uh, still has doubts about how many movies can work on theater screen. You know, in fact, Tar was a major flop as a theatrical.
It was actually, yeah.
You know, and in fact, most of the quote Oscar contenders did not do well in theaters.
Mm-hmm.
They did okay on streaming. You know, the only movies that have really drawn big audiences have been big commercial films like Top Gun
Maverick, which saved the film. Yeah.
Which saved the film, and Elvis and Avatar, and just more recently, John Wick Chapter 4 was a big hit, you know.
Correct.
So it's keeping the multiplexes open. And my hope is that the older audience, which I think was the most cautious about going back to movie theaters, will slowly come back now that we seem to be coming out of the tunnel of COVID.
Yeah.
You know, so maybe in a couple of years, we'll be back to a fully public screening of people getting together in the real world to see movies together. Because I think, as I mentioned to you last year, I had my serious doubts about even bothering to have a film festival online, because to me, a film festival is, a lot of it is about being there with the people, talking about it afterwards, having a Q&A, having a guest in person. But COVID taught us all a lot of lessons, you know, and our festival was canceled 2020. So as we mobilized for 2021, we realized we had to do an online screening like a lot of these festivals were doing.
Yeah.
And it was a rousing success. So I was won over, you know, and even some of the directors we spoke with last year felt the same way. Oh, I want my movie in a theater at all costs. But when they realized if it did get into a theater, nobody would show up.
Right.
That you want your film to be seen. And so we're slowly inching back, and you know, the glass, I think, is now a little more than half full.
You know, Joe, do you honestly feel that the future of film is going to be back in the theater 100% eventually? Or are we going to become a hybrid of online or in our easy chair at home and partly theater?
I think it is going to be a hybrid, but there was sort of news last week. It hasn't been confirmed, but one of the major entertainment websites has said that the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, when it meets in late April, is planning to put in regulations that will bolster theatrical screening. They're no longer going to basically let a streaming movie win Best Picture the way Nomadland did and the way Coda did. That, and you know, there's always been I mean, even those streaming movies would be shown in one theater in LA or New York to qualify, but nobody would see it except, you know, people in those cities who were movie buffs. Right. But what this article said was they're going to push for having movies released in at least 15 markets to qualify for the Oscars. So that's great news for people who love theatrical movies. It's getting the Oscars back to what it was originally about, which was theatrical movies as opposed to television. You know, there was a famous case when Liv Ullmann, you know, was getting raves for Scenes from a Marriage, where everybody assumed she'd be nominated and perhaps win, but that film had been shown on Swedish television prior to being released as a movie in the United States, and that disqualified it. That's how rigid they were in the 70s. So, you know, I don't know if we have to go back to that, but I'm very cheered by this support for seeing movies in theaters, because I think if you can do it, it is the way to see a movie, because you're with other people. It's bigger than you. you can't turn it off and go get a cup of coffee,
That's right.
or
You can't get distracted by the cell phone. That's right.
and this is slightly off topic, but I found that a lot of people who saw Everything Everywhere All at Once as a streaming movie versus in a theater were not as fond of it as the people who saw it in a theater, because it's a wild, hallucinatory, psychedelic movie. And when it's bigger than you and you're forced to really focus and concentrate, I thought it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it a lot. But I can see where people at home on a smaller screen would be like,
Well, walk away.
There's not enough plot for me, or it's too crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think something's lost when movies can't have at least some time on a movie screen. So the fact that we're going to have Divertimento on a screen, I am so thrilled. I can't even tell you.
Well, I celebrate you, and I celebrate Focus on French Cinema for this. I've got to say, this gets us back to the ads that Nicole Kidman was doing for getting back into theaters.
Yes.
It was so precious when they came out for that short-lived life. But I've been waiting for the Academy to come out with some sort of restriction, because we have to get a coherence back.
Absolutely.
After the near scandal we had this year also. I mean, it's perplexing, and I think it leaves people, we're already left in chaos after COVID. We're still trying to find a centeredness for ourselves. And we need help. We need help gathering and finding that focus. So I'm thrilled to hear that news.
And I mean, there's ever since the 80s when cable rose up and then VHS, there's always been a market for people watching movies at home. And some people do prefer that. But back there would always be what they call a window of 5-6 months before that would be made available on VHS. So there was an encouragement to go out. If you wanted to really see this hot movie, you had to go out to a theater. And with streaming, I think one of the things the Academy is going to have to address is, I think they're also going to have to push for a bigger window, because some of these movies will be in theaters and be on streaming within 2 months. And, people have learned this, and people are saying like, well, I'll wait for it to be on streaming.
So I know.
So we're in a big transitional period, and I think you have to accept the technology. And also, at home, you have access to almost the entire film history. If you have Criterion Channel, you can watch Truffaut. If you have Peacock, you can watch all these Universal films from yesteryear. So I'm not going to knock streaming, but I would hate to see it replace the actual.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing I want to point out about the Oscars that I admired this year, besides the lack of drama on stage,
yes,
I really thought we got back to an elegance, which was brilliant. But the segment they did promoting the Academy's museum. Yes. And I loved that, because we have to remember that Hollywood still is the center point of our film world and always has been. And we all need to, if we are there, and real film buffs, to get to that museum and have a really good day, of imbibing and soaking up all this lore. So I was thrilled to see that there was such an integrity about the Oscars this year. So
and they got 2 million more viewers, which was good news. So
really good news,
as opposed to the declining ratings of recent years.
Of the recent years,
I think the fact that more big movies were nominated, like Top Gun and Elvis and Avatar, it drew in more people. Frankly, the first year of COVID, they were movies that people weren't that interested in. So the ratings were dismal.
Yeah, correct.
No.
Well, so tell me more about Focus on French Cinema this year, and everything that's taking place in a theater will be at the Avon Theater in Stanford.
Avon Theater in Stanford, which is a gorgeous place. Fabulous place. Opening night is April 20th at 7:30. The opening night film is a new film called Champagne, which is a wonderful film about a group of friends who have a reunion at a vineyard, beautiful vineyard. And one of the friends has a new girlfriend that the other friends don't particularly care for. So the movie is about sort of the strains on friendship as you get older. And I
Hmm.
mean, it reminded me a little bit of that Alan Alda movie, The Four Seasons. There's a little bit of
Yes.
the Big Chill in it, and it's when we saw this, we just thought this is perfect for opening night. You want something bubbly and
Literally.
fun, that literally that fun that's going to make people want to see more French
Yeah.
films.
Yeah.
That's a terrific film. And this centerpiece, which we borrowed that name from the New York Film Festival, which has an opening night, a closing night, and a centerpiece that they give special attention to. We have this wonderful film called Mother Valley, which one of the stars of it is Natalie Baye, the great French actress who was
Yes.
guest of honor, I want to say 6 years ago at the
Mhm.
festival. And it's set in Lebanon in the 50s, before all of the turmoil there between factions and religions began. And you follow this one family that is sort of under the pressures of what's happening in their country. Wealthy family trying to keep together, trying to hold on to some traditions. And Natalie Baye plays a visiting French tourist whose son is a doctor in Beirut. And lots of complications ensue. But in addition to being very, very strong drama with wonderful performances, it's beautifully shot. Again, it's going to benefit from being seen on a big screen because you feel like you're there. So
Fantastic.
it has a real sense of place. So between that, Champagne, and Divertimento, we've got three winners on the big screen, and the online choices, as usual, we've tried to be balanced and diversified. We have a great crime drama called Night of the 12th, which won César Awards, and it's just one of the best French films of the past year. Fabulous police procedural. We have a wonderful sort of social comedy called Let's Get Lost from Belgium, which is about people hitting their 40s and thinking there's got to be more to life than working 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, and the husband goes off the grid, sort of on the verge of a nervous breakdown, and what he does inspires everybody around him to rethink their lives, and it reminds me of sort of a Woody Allen or Paul Mazursky film from the
Mhm.
70s, 80s. It's very much, it's funny, but it's all built on truth, and real situations. So, and we've got another remarkable film called Three Nights a Week, which is about it's about the drag performance scene in Paris. Okay, and this straight photographer who's trying to make a name for himself asks to photograph these drag performers, and he actually travels with them. And it takes you inside this fascinating culture. It also explores sexual fluidity, and that the photographer finds himself drawn to this one drag performer, and he's not sure what this means. Is he falling for a woman or a man? It gets into gender confusion, and it's all done with very high style. I would compare it to a Pedro Almodovar movie. It's funny, it's
Wow.
lively. So people can go to the Focus on French Cinema website, and everything is listed there, and you can get tickets there as well. And we're very, very proud of this slate that we have this year. I mean, it's been a year in the making. We start looking at potential movies right after we end one year's festival and start making lists. And the one thing we insist on is that we all agree they're good. You know what I mean?
Yes.
We don't book them for political purposes or because there's a star who's fashionable. We want each movie to stand on its own as a good movie. And I can vouch for that this year, for sure.
Well, this is exciting, Joe. I love it. And what interviews will you have with filmmakers going?
Well, we have Marie Castille, who's fabulous. She was here our first, or we did a Zoom interview with her for our first online festival. She did a remarkable movie called The Good Man, which starred Noémie Merlant, who is now a rising star, who played a transgender man. Complicated story, but Wonderful film. She's fabulous. Great interview. This film, Let's Get Lost. We really lucked out. I was talking to the director, and he had put out the word to the leading lady, Suzanne Clement, who's a wonderful French-Canadian actress who also works a lot in Europe. And she tapped in on Zoom during a break from a TV show she was making in France. And so we got an interview with her, again, the power of Zoom, that
Yep.
she would have been lost to us if we had to try to get her someplace.
That is remarkable.
The actress who plays the murder victim in Night of the 12th, she was on the streets of Paris. We contacted her. She sat down in a cafe and we did a Zoom interview with her that will be online. So we've got directors, we've got actors. We have a really interesting film from French Canada called Niagara, about three brothers who aren't getting along, who have to reunite at their father's funeral. Believe it or not, it's more a comedy than a drama. But we have the producer of that film, and that's an angle you don't always get at film festivals. How do you finance these movies? How do you get them together? How did they fake parts of Canada that they couldn't travel to because they didn't have the budget? So these interviews will be like a little film course for people who sign up, watch them, because you really hear top talents talking about how they do their work.
Oh, I love this. I mean, we don't have to go to UCLA, to embrace the film. We've got it here in Greenwich, Connecticut, and in your new home at the beautiful Avon Theater in Stamford. And it really is befitting to the film festival. It's so sad that we've lost the film theaters in Greenwich.
I know that's our challenge for the future. In that, this is a little off the record. I shouldn't even be saying it, but we don't want to have a full festival, nor could we probably have one at the Avon in Stamford, because this is a project of the Alliance Française Greenwich, and traditionally it was at that great multiplex down on Railroad Avenue, big lobby.
Oh yeah.
So we're exploring the possibilities of having it somewhere else in Greenwich. Where that will be, how will we do it, is a question to be answered. But it was really that was a COVID devastation, was the closing of that theater, and then the decision by the owners of the theater not to reopen.
Yeah.
And there used to be another theater on Greenwich Avenue, and now Greenwich, Connecticut is a town without a movie theater.
It's tragic.
It's terrible.
My favorite theater was actually the one on Greenwich Avenue. I remember when I first moved here, and it just relying on that theater and the ease of it. It's a sad day, but I'll tell you, Joe, you and I have talked about the kind of the yin and yang of COVID.
Yeah.
What we've lost has been replaced with the power of Zoom, as you've just said. And that essence of communication, I think, is worth millions to us. It's
absolutely.
It's connected the world. And as you say, for a person who's just walking down a street, to be able to dip into a cafe and give you an interview is really something.
It's absolutely crazy. When she was on her iPhone, and there we go.
Here we go.
you cannot beat that. So yeah, like I said, a couple of years ago, I was not the biggest advocate of online festivals, but now I see the real possibilities, and this will be our third, and we've had nothing but good feedback, and we've increased the size of the number of people who see the movies, and
wow,
we're in a new world. What can I say? And we're going to have to take it year by year and see what's happening and what's possible. And it's true everywhere. There are multiplexes closing in New York City because of this transition.
It's so tragic.
It's so tragic. I used to have I live in Black Rock, Bridgeport. There were two multiplexes right on the Fairfield Bridgeport border, literally. Yeah. Showcase Cinemas Bridgeport, Fairfield Cinemas. Both are gone because of COVID.
Yeah. Yeah.
So where I used to be able to walk to 25 screens between the two places, now I have to schlep to Trumbull to an AMC, so we need to support the theaters that are still with us.
Absolutely, no question. And you know what I think is interesting? Probably when you and I are long gone off this earth,
Uh-huh.
in another 30 years, let's say, there are going to be some young people that get together and say, hey, let's build a theater. And so we can have that fantastic experience, of sanctity of a darkened room with popcorn smell in the background to be able to see the visual.
And in urban areas, that's happening with places like the Alamo Draft House, which is a chain. There's one in downtown Manhattan. There's one in Brooklyn, and I believe there's one in Yonkers. I think it started in Texas, but they're very much into alcoholic beverages, diverse food, festival screening, having like a little focus on one actor or actress. Mm-hmm. And there's a place in New York called the Metrograph, which opened, I would say, 2 or 3 years before COVID, which has a restaurant attached and a bookstore,
wow.
and
fantastic.
And does all, so I think people will always respond as long as there are those who are willing to take a chance on creating these venues. But you have to do it in a more creative way. It can't just be a multiplex where you expect people to drive up and go automatically. Yeah. Those days are gone.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I tell you, I'm going to go out and build a drive-in theater. I want that back. I want to have my King Kong experience out of my car on a summer night.
Pamela, there's a theater I follow on Instagram. I think it's called the Mahoning Drive-In in Pennsylvania, where these young people took over this drive-in. And they do the most creative programming, all of drive-in movies. I think they're open from May through September. And they show horror movies and musicals, you know what I mean? And they have online events associated with it. They're using the power of the internet, but they just love the idea of a drive-in, and they're working their tails off to keep this one going in Pennsylvania.
Isn't that interesting? I love that. I've got to find this, Joe. I've got to find this.
It's Mahoning. I think it's Mahoning, Pennsylvania. Yeah. And they have, it's just fun I've never been there. I probably will never go there, but I look at their Instagram all the time because they're so creative, and they'll get like the fourth lead in some movie from the 70s to come and appear at their drive-in. I guess the word is spreading in the indie film world and the horror film. There are all these horror conventions all over the country all the time. And so they'll have people come dressed up as, Freddy Krueger. It just looks like a great place. And I think that's the future of theatrical or in-person exhibition, is people who make the experience of going to the movie as interesting as the movie itself.
Absolutely. And then, of course, we still have the TCM Film Festival in Los Angeles, which I've been to once, which is fabulous because of the guest speakers and the lectures.
Oh. I think that's starting in a couple of weeks, and they're having Shirley Jones introduce the Music Man. I mean, they do great programming.
They do. It's fantastic what Ben Mankiewicz does out there.
Oh, wow.
But it's fantastic what you guys are doing for Connecticut and for the Francophone film world. And Joe, how can we find more information about tickets and attendance?
You have to go to the Focus on French Cinema website, and I think the ticket site is focusonfrenchcinema.eventive, EVENTIVE, which is that major ticket selling hub. We're connected to them in terms of selling the tickets or selling the screeners to these movies. So that's where you go, and we have a very active Instagram account for the festival and for the Alliance Francaise. So there's all kinds of internet stuff, but yeah, I would say hit the website. And the other thing I should mention is it's 10 days from April 20th to April 30th, and we've set it up so that when you book a movie, you have from the minute it's sort of like the way Amazon rents movies. The minute you book the movie and decide to watch it, you then have 48 hours that the movie is in your possession.
Just
If you want to watch,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to watch half of it tonight and you can do however you want. So it's a pretty good system, and it's comparable to the way people watch movies on streaming now.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we have all of our tomorrows here today with your fantastic festival. And Joe, I want to thank you. Just a couple more questions for you. I'm curious. This filmmaker of Divertimento, Marie Castillo, is she a musician herself? I mean, she took such care in mixing the sound for this.
No, she isn't, but she has a little bit of background in documentary, so she's interested in the backgrounds of her stories, and she does tremendous research for whatever project she works on. Like, for instance, making this movie A Good Man, she really wanted to get a trans man to play the role, but she could not find one who was right. But in the course of looking, she created a directory, which now other directors can use, of all the trans actors in France, basically. So I mean, she's not just a artist filmmaker, she's also a researcher. She wants these movies to ring true in terms of the backdrops of, but this was the first, I believe I'm being accurate in saying this was the first time where she was approached by an outside entity to do this film. Normally she creates her projects and gets them going and all of that. But she was immediately taken with this story and with these two sisters and with the Divertimento Orchestra. And clearly she dove right in. And this is as personal a film as she's made, even though it didn't originate with her.
What she is doing to promote music worldwide for all is profound.
I agree.
I will back this 1,000%, and I applaud her for her work. My second question to you, your centerpiece film, will Natalie Bai actually be here for the film?
No, unfortunately not. I mean, we're still working on the possibility of maybe getting a Zoom with her or one of the other performers. But you see, the challenge now with in-person guests is the industry over there has ramped up again. You know what I mean? And people are like, we got Noémie Merlant 2 years ago, like in between 2 days of her working on. She's actually in Tar as Kate Blanchett's assistant, who sort of disappeared from the movie. But no, so we won't have Natalie. We might be able to get her to say hello or whatever, or because we're also working on, perhaps for these 3 screenings, having talent on Zoom or on Skype or whatever. That has not been finalized. We have to work out the technical glitches. But Natalie is a great actress, and she was a fabulous guest of honor. She was there the whole time. We showed, I think, 3 or 4 of her films. Just a charming lady. Great talent.
Wonderful artist, wonderful woman, and been around. My God, when I think of the return of Martin Guerre, there she is as a young girl. And
before that, Day for Night, I think, was her first film where she played the script girl, in the Truffaut film back in 1973. She's got an incredible career.
Wow. Well, you've got it all, Joe. I've got to say, Joe Meyers, thank you. Thank you so much for talking to me today about Focus on French Cinema. And 2023, you guys have withstood all the odds, and now you are flourishing. And I have to say kudos to everyone on the board, all your researchers, everyone who's looking for films, to the amazing Renee Ketchum, who, is your leader. And as you go forward, you're just giving us all the joy and all the nuance that French film industry has to offer. So thank you for that. And I encourage you listening.
Thank you for having me on and helping us get the word out. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, my dear pleasure, Joe. So best of luck to you, and I hope to see you there on opening night. And don't be a stranger on center stage, okay?
Absolutely, anytime.
All right, everyone, I want to wish everybody well, to all my listeners, and please go to centerstagewithpamelakuhn.com for more shows like this, where we talk about the arts and we spin the artistic world and keep it afloat. So stay safe, everyone. Thank you again to Joe Meyers, Programming Director of the Focus on French Cinema. And this is Pamela Kuhn, and the curtain is now down on Center Stage.